All right. Cool. This will start. Let's see, I can already see over here. Okay. This is a kind of a weirdly laid out room. I think I'll talk like this. All right. So, hello everybody. I'm Lance Albertson. I'm going to be talking about project hosting, FOSS project hosting specifically. Kind of go through various things. For those of you that don't know me, I'm in at the Open Source Lab at Oregon State University for 8.5 years. We do a lot of project hosting. We host people like the Linux Foundation, Apache Software Foundation. So needless to say, I have a little bit of experience in this. But this is kind of what's going to be going on. Let's see if it's working. Oh, there we go. So what am I going to be talking primarily about? Some of the major advances I think have happened. You might argue with me if you want. And then I'm going to talk about kind of where the OSL kind of wants to go with their project hosting, and kind of where I like to see us go and see is that the right place we want to go. And then kind of we can open up to discuss like what's important for projects, you know, what should we be focusing on, and so forth. So with that, I figured I'd go off and just kind of summarize some of the types of hosting we have. We have the typical file hosting, you know, just have an ISO download. We have a hosted platform hosting, so that's your source storages, your GitHubs, things like that. So they kind of tie everything together. Then you have your co-location hosting, which is where the OSL falls in, primarily, kind of, where you physically have a server hosted there, and it's, you know, for your use and whatever you want to do. And kind of new recently is continuous integration hosting, so you can, you know, test your code and stuff. So diving in a little bit more. A lot of universities, including us, have hosted a lot of file servers. These are your FTP servers, as we like to call it. Various ISPs also do it. I've actually seen on our rsync logs, seen Facebook sync from us for their internal stuff. We actually got a recent, what was the company? I think it was Linode, actually, I think, was asking about something to having access to sync from us. So it's pretty cool. And then there's other organizations. So like Kernel.org obviously has their mirror network. ISC, I think, has their mirror network. A whole bunch of other people have their various networks. So it's been around. It's kind of the old technology. Kind of, you can think of it like CDNs, but old school, kind of. But yeah. And when I say FTP servers, I really mean HTTP servers. So kind of going to the platform hosting, and it was kind of fun kind of going through the years of seeing how things kind of came out. So SourceForge was obviously the first thing that came out in '99, and then GNU Savannah came out because we're like, SourceForge closed their stuff and we want to be completely free. So we did that. Then Ubuntu launched Launchpad. And that's still around. Google Code started in 2006, but it's now being defunct and closed down. And then GitHub came around. And GitLab's kind of one of those, you can run your own GitHub in a box kind of stuff. So I figured that was important to put up there. There's others up there. I could have listed Gitorius. You can name them. There's actually a good Wikipedia page that lists them all. But it kind of shows like the progression over the last 15 years, kind of things that happened throughout all of that. And then co-location hosting, I was trying to figure out who else does this really. I know the ISC does it. And I know we do it, but I don't know really who else does it. I know a lot of other universities do some co-location hosting as well. When I used to be part of the Gen2 infrastructure project, I might still technically be, but we had hosting in like Indiana University and some other places, other ISPs and so forth. So there was companies that would support that particular project. But you know, it was pretty much getting support was kind of a pain because they did it out of their free will to kind of help the project. Is there anybody else that I'm missing that should be on that list of like major co-location hosting people? Oh, PSU, I forgot about PSU. Yeah, because you guys host Free Desktop. I knew I was forgetting a major one. Submit a pull request.
Well, but again, it's like, that's a goodness of our heart and a frayed relationship that was set up based on social trust 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And so the current status is very awkward because it's not formal.
Yeah. Yeah. So not many of us doing this anymore. And I actually heard recently that ISE is spinning down some of their data center space. So there might be some shuffling around, moving to us even more on some of those things. So let's move into continuous integration hosting. And that's really a new thing that's been out. I don't know what that's about.
We're in the wrong room.
We apparently are. Yes. But there's probably other continuous integration CI type hosting out there, but that's really the new space. Everybody wants to test their code, whether it's their own internal project code, their company code, or whatever. So it's been a really big thing. We're even using Travis CI a little bit, but it has its own limitations. So lots of that is in there. So what's really happened in the last 15 years? Well, I think one of the biggest things that's changed is GitHub. GitHub, when it came on the scene, changed everything. They did everything that basically everybody that was on SourceForge wanted. And kind of tied to that, Git was really what did all of that. Distributed version control really helped that. We either love or we hate GitHub, but I still think it was a major player, and it continues to be a major player in project hosting. Public cloud computing also was really big. When EC2 came out, you don't have to have co-location. You can actually host stuff in the cloud. Now, whether or not projects can afford it, there's that. But a lot of these projects, or a lot of these companies like GitHub and others, can basically provide most of the stuff they need. So public cloud computing has been really important for a lot of these projects. And then there's more content delivery network choices out there. And even some companies like Fastly actually either give free or discounted CDN access to open source projects because they support it. They run open source to power all of their stuff. So that's actually less important for the smaller projects. But projects grow and you got to deal with that. So you kind of have to deal with that. And the recent stuff with CI testing has been a huge, huge thing. And I think we're just raising the surface of what that really means and how it really will change that. But I think the advances we made in the last 5 years have been really important in FOSS hosting and projects in general. So yeah, and feel free to interject anything while I talk through all of this. So this is my slide of my opinions of things. So probably, things I've always thought about over the years with the public cloud is like, is that gonna, basically replace the OSL? Why or why not would it replace the OSL? Yes and no. And I kind of look at it two different ways. If you've been into some, like if you were at Nib's talk earlier about public clouds, you would know a little bit about this. But co-location, it's more expensive. You got to buy the hardware up front. But public cloud, cheaper initial costs. You don't have to worry about buying hardware. You just spin up stuff and it works. You hope. Co-location, you have a little more flexibility in what you want with customizations. If you want to have specific hardware, you want to have stuff running on, you can do that. With cloud, what they have is what you can use. They have a product you like, there you go. Co-location, you typically can have better performance because you can dedicate a machine to your workload. In public cloud, you're at the will of how things are provisioned out there, as many people know. And with co-location, you have more control, so you can design your infrastructure as you want, but that can make it more complicated, take more time. The public cloud, you're at the will of the API and what they can offer. So there's that. And sometimes projects like having a hardware ownership, but that can also be a problem too. What happens when the server dies? Where does it go? In the public cloud, you just pay for the service and it's just kind of there. So a lot of projects, it depends on the philosophy. If they want to be true open source, free software, they don't want to be in a public cloud. And part of the appeal that the open source lab brings is we're a neutral hosting company. Well, not company, organization. What I like to call the Switzerland of open source hosting. Companies can come to us and they can, present things that they want us to support, but we're not going to advocate one way or the other. Then projects can come to us and we can offer them a service that they know that they can trust. And we do our best that we can to provide that. So there's advantages both ways, but I think it's important to note that, there's still that divide. There's a lot of large projects out there that are in the public cloud now. So I also wanted to talk about some of the advances that the OSL's made in the past decade or more on kind of things that we've tried to do and try to keep up with technologies. One is virtual computing and cloud computing, private cloud. The first foray was with GNU in 2009. Before that, we were using Zen by itself, managing it manually. It was a pain in the rear, but it worked. And it really helped us along. And we did a lot of this before OpenStack and even EC2 kind of came around. So it was really important. It allowed us to spin up VMs for projects to do things that they need to do. There's a lot of pet VMs that got them going. GNU is an open source project that Google created. It's basically infrastructure as a service. It's just simple compute resources. It's easy to use, easy to maintain compared to OpenStack. And we use that quite a bit. And more recently, we've gotten into running OpenStack internally, at least, for testing infrastructure. And I'll talk more about what we plan on doing with that. But we're planning on having a private cloud, I suppose, with OpenStack for open source projects. And we're just beginning to talk about containers and what it means and what are we going to do about it. And we haven't really. Spencer asked me, he's like, have I gotten any requests of hosting containers for projects? And I was like, not yet, but I'm sure it's coming. So we got to figure out what we want to do with that. And thankfully, the two co-founders of CoreOS are OSL student employees that graduated 10 years ago. So we've got that figured out, I hope. We also ventured into some storage technologies. We went into GlusterFS. It's been okay-ish. I'm wanting to look into Ceph. I'm also looking into Swift and S3 type storage for projects. We haven't had very many requests for that, but we're looking at, we want to be able to start providing more elastic storage options for a lot of these projects. So yeah. So the other big thing that we did in the last 10 years was configuration management. We've used CF Engine 2. We still technically are. But the big thing that we started to dive into is basically switching our infrastructure over to Chef. And that helped us out quite a bit. And this can be a choose your own tool thing, but for us, Chef worked for us at the time. I was actually talking with two of my students coming up. They're like, so why are we using Chef? And it was one of those, it wasn't political. There was no drama. It was one of those, at the time, we were trying to get Pup working the way we wanted. 3 years ago. It wasn't working the way we wanted it. We tried Chef over the weekend, and we got everything we wanted to go on just that weekend. And we're like, oh, that's cool. And went with that. So Chef's really enabled us to kind of build a lot of test infrastructure around it to make sure things work. And that's really important. We hire a bunch of students who work for us, undergrad students. And this is their first time dealing with this type of stuff, and we need to have an environment where they can test things safely. So Chef kind of enabled that with similar tools to enable integration testing. So we can say, hey, can we spin up a MySQL server and it actually works? Yes. And it also enabled us to scale up infrastructure quite a bit faster. Before it was a lot of, oh, we have this one little thing that we have to do. We got to fiddle this thing. They got to fiddle this thing. With Chef, it really makes it really easy. One of the projects that you may not know that we host is Rock the Vote. So Rock the Vote, the registration application. How many of you don't know what Rock the Vote is first? Okay, couple people. So Rock the Vote is an organization that promotes voter registration in the United States. They're big on MTV and blah, blah, blah with that. But the registration application behind it is an open source project. It's actually on GitHub. If you look for Rocky under, I think, Trust the Vote organization, I think, you'll see it. It's a Rails application. And we had a partnership with them to basically host it. And we enabled some, we got a little bit of funding out of it, used open source technology, got a little bit of PR out of it, it's great. But one of the things we did past year was they have these application rollouts. And we don't do the application side, we just do the hosting side. And we had it under CF Engine, which was a pain. We couldn't flexibly deploy things as we wanted to. And so we took the initiative and converted everything to Chef, and now it works really easily. So when we got to spin up a new test cluster, it literally doesn't take us very long to do. So we're hoping to move that out in a bunch of other areas at the open source lab. We also tried to standardize our deployments of the various services that we provide. As any tech organization, we have a lot of technical debt in trying to standardize that. And really what we've tried to do, especially with the Chef side of things, is trying to delegate the infrastructure code to projects. A lot of these projects have no system administration experience, and we kind of help provide that. So we've been trying to do that quite a bit. So now let's get to the actual question of the hour is what do open source projects really need for things? So the first thing I have discovered over the last years is testing resources. They need flexible testing resources. And there's services out there like Travis CI that work really well, but there's some others that doesn't quite fit the needs that a lot of these projects need. I've heard a lot of projects saying, hey, can you guys run a Jenkins server so that we can run this long-running test on a server that maybe has SSDs and we don't have to worry about contention on Travis CI? It's like, yeah, that makes sense. We can fit that niche. We don't want to replace Travis CI, but there's bigger projects or bigger issues that can come out of that. And that also kind of brings up the fact that a lot of these projects want to customize their testing suite and their integration testing quite a bit. Maybe it doesn't fit with one of those online tools. We're kind of a one-stop shop to kind of bring that kind of stuff. And I think that's really important for a lot of projects. And some of them have unique testing challenges. So some of the projects, for example, like Memcache, they want to be able to test what happens when we put a crap ton of RAM in a machine. Does the stuff actually work? A developer just can't buy a machine and do that. And if they buy one, where are they going to put it? They want other people to have access to it. In this case, it was actually a Facebook engineer that works on it internally, but he works for both of those projects as well, and he didn't want to host it inside of Facebook, so they came to us. And so we enabled that project to be able to test things in that way. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting testing challenges that kind of come up. How many of you have, or what do you guys think about this testing challenge for a lot of open source projects? What's really needed that I don't have listed up there?
Well, what in Puppet, we need to test virtualization. Well, in a couple of my hats, we can't test in a VM because we need to test virtualization. So we need actual gear.
Yeah. So I know, like in the OpenStack project, a lot of the problems I have is how do we test OpenStack on OpenStack? The whole we could do nested virtualization, but it doesn't quite work the way you want it. So yeah, there's a whole problem of we need real hardware to test the things for some of these things.
Yeah, one of my major headaches right now is arbitrary code execution for an online playpen where new users can run stuff in. So figuring out how to isolate the box that does that is a serious challenge that could potentially be addressed by something like the OSL.
Yeah. Well, think about it some more. I'll go through my slides a little bit more, but I wanted to at least plug that in a little bit. Something else that I think is important that's kind of missing, and I've always wanted the OSL to fill that, but we obviously don't have all the resources in the world to do it. But managed service hosting. What does that mean? That means hosting complex platforms, which means what? Garrett, GitLab, Jenkins, all that crap that, well, I don't want to say crap because they're good projects. But from a sysadmin point of view, they can be annoying to manage and upgrade and maintain over a long time. And a lot of projects, they don't want to deal with that. They just want stuff to work. And so there's things that I think projects really want to be able to do is host that kind of stuff in an easy way. We already do Mailman, but we can make it a little bit more flexible. Now Mailman 3 is out. There's cool features in that. People like Jira. Name your bug tracking tool that you want to use. A whole bunch of things. We get a lot of random requests. What are we going to do? How do we do that? So, that's part of what I think is where the OSL can kind of fit in. We can, work on configuration management, maybe some tie-in tools that kind of simplify a lot of that. Right now, it's very hands-on, and it can be very, very extensive. I also think there's a need for neutral CDN mirroring. I haven't really heard a lot of people talk about this quite yet, but I can kind of see this coming. Like I mentioned, there's companies out there that will offer open source or access to their CDN, but what happens when that company goes away, or they change their terms, or the person you knew there moved to a different company, and now the company decides they don't want to do that anymore. And we've hosted our own FTP mirroring infrastructure for a long time, and it's really designed for the simple ISO images, package repositories. But what about for maybe web assets or other things that just are easy to move around? And that's where I think it's important. Projects get popular. They need to scale fast. We can't just scale things on various things. Our current FTP mirroring infrastructure is not flexible enough. It was designed 10 years ago, and it's flexible, but it's not designed to be API driven, for example. In the case of S3 and Swift, we can use APIs to upload things and use it that way. And that's really what's important. You want to have an API. You don't want to send in a ticket to be able to upload a file or set up an rsync module. You want an API key that you can use to upload things. You don't have to worry about it. And then at a certain point, you want to be geographically diverse. Open Source Lab is currently only in Corvallis outside of our FTP servers, with actually our 3, one in Corvallis, one in Chicago, and one in New York. That's the only place where we're geographically diverse. So I think that's really important. And then having a hosted by trusted entity is really important. I'm trying not to say too much, but a lot of projects trust us because that's what we pride ourselves in, is that we're neutral. We try to help any project that we can that makes sense. We try not to be favorites. So what do you guys think on the neutral CDN mirroring and projects? Is that something important for some projects? Not? Yes? Okay.
Yeah, having the secure distribution is just essential for any project that wants people to trust it. Things like Tor is an example that comes to mind. Like, I don't want to be running just sketchy something from somewhere.
Yeah. Well, and a lot of this stems from, we would get those requests from, name your small distribution you've never heard of before. Hey, can you host us? And we're like, yeah, but we only have so much space on our FTP mirrors. We have to be very constrictive of what we put on there. Because it's not designed to scale out really well. It's designed to be stupid fast, which I think you guys know that it's fast. This is like, how do we deal with that? Well, let's make a second-tier mirroring system that uses other technologies that make it easy to scale out. They don't need to be on a stupid fast network. We actually had a recent email exchange with SourceForge JP, which is now called, crap, I forgot their acronym. But it's the Japanese SourceForge that forked off of SourceForge. And they want to actually have it mirrored here because they don't have very many US mirrors. Like, well, it's, a terabyte, but that's a lot for us. The Debian repository by itself is a terabyte. It's a lot. So I think it's important. And there's also been an increase to wanting to have access to specialized hardware. There's a lot of new upcoming hardware that's becoming relevant in the industry. ARM64, Power 8. We've had a long-time relationship with IBM, Open Compute. Name your thing up there. There's lots of stuff out there, and it's hard for projects to get access to that. We've actually had some experience with the GCC Compile Farm project to be able to host machines for them, which enable a lot of developers to have access to that. So if you care about that platform, you want to have access to that. You want to be able to port things. You want to fix bugs. Power 8 now can run on Little Indian. And there's Indianness problems. I know we're running into one with libFFI that's kind of running into that. So it's important. And I hate to use this term, but we actually, another group inside of where the Open Source Lab is at, but IoT devices, that whole thing. Name your device. What's it going to be running? How are you going to be able to test that kind of stuff? So, you need to be able to have access to do that. So next question is, how do we get there? How do we get project hosting to the place that we need to have it for the next iteration? And I call it 3.0 because I felt like we did the 1.0 with SourceForge, 2.0 was GitHub. This is what I'd like to have the 3.0 to kind of do. So this is where I kind of talk about the OSL Vision 2.0. Dealing with what we want. So the first thing we want to do is a big technical upgrade. We've had a lot of technical debt over the years. We want to really build and expand the infrastructure we currently use and make it better and easier to deploy and manage and do things. So, make GNU better, make OpenStack better. We think we need both. We don't need one or the other. We need them both. We actually want to build some automated build services as well. So we were talking about, having, hey, I don't want to worry about how to set up, Jenkins or BuildBot or whatever. Maybe if we make a service with an API, it's kind of like Travis CI, but simple. They can do things, we want to be able to automate those tests. We want to make it easier. We also want to add actual test services with that and support it. Maybe include some project dashboards. One of the things that I always have wondered about is we have, I think it's almost 15 years worth of FTP server logs that I've archived that we've never done anything with. And there's so much metrics and so much data there that would be amazing to the projects. You know, I've talked to a lot of projects, so like, we just want to know if we're getting a lot of downloads from a particular area, so we know you need to have more developers that go there to help with that project, you know. So looking into that. And we want to do the CDN now, making an OSL CDN essentially, call FTP Mirroring 2.0, whatever you want to call it. And as all things important, security audits. You know, it's really gotten to be a big thing, and we're actually crafting a proposal for the core initiative of the Linux Foundation to kind of help with that, because we host a lot of projects, and it's kind of important. So there's a lot of things that we want to do, and a lot of this stems from finding funding and all that, which is my job. But if we could do all this, it'd be great. The other cool thing that I thought would be really good is we need to expand the OSL and project hosting that we provide outside of OSU. And so something that we want to start doing is called the OSL University Network. Basically, we collaborate with a global set of universities, starting out with the US and working outwards from there. And basically what we want to do is we want to host at least a half-ragged year to start out with, just so we can have stuff hosted there. You know, it'll be stuff with running OpenStack and any, you know, kind of have a mini version of the OSL. It wouldn't be one of those like we would send project hosts there, because that would be a pain in the butt to manage remotely. But the other thing we can do is we can get the student population at those other universities involved and get them in going. Because a lot of universities come to us, it's like, we love what the OSL does, but how do we replicate it? And the first thing we tell them, you gotta build a data center for yourself. Like, we can't do that. So yeah, we're trying to expand that and make it much bigger and better. So a lot of cool things with that. We also want to re-engineer a lot of our back-end services we provide. So, you know, convert finally everything to Chef and CentOS, for example, so that we can actually manage things sanely. We want to actually catch up to technology trends. We're continuing to fall behind on things. You know, especially with the container market, although people still don't know what that actually is either. But, you know, we want to catch up with it. We want to be able to use that technology. You know, we want to have fully testable infrastructure. A lot of the bigger organizations like Wikipedia has that already. And I know OpenStack Infra probably has that as well. Yeah. Yeah.
So what tools are you imagining for testing and infrastructure as heterogeneous as OSL?
That's an interesting question. For our case, it's basically utilizing the Chef toolchain that we use. So we use a tool called Test Kitchen to do integration testing on specific parts of the Chef cookbook that we use. And we've also ventured into multi-node testing, which is the fun. How do we get two nodes to talk to each other to make sure everything works right? And so there's some technology that Chef has provided to do that. And that's actually how I converted all of our FTP mirroring stuff over to Chef, because I wanted to actually test. I actually needed 3 nodes to test that. I needed an upstream mirror, I needed a master node, and I needed a slave node. How do I make that all work? And there's a nice little tool called Chef Provisioning. And it's one of those, yo dog, I heard you like to chef, so why don't you chef with your chef? So you write Chef code, which then deploys nodes, in this case OpenStack nodes, to act as these 3 nodes, and then it installs Chef and then runs Chef on those nodes. And then I can make sure my whole tool chain works as it's supposed to. And there's a test framework that does that. So from our point of view, we want to be able to, we want to do the chaos monkey thing, but inside of our own private cloud, more or less. And speaking of which, we want to make it more robust. You know, right now, like any IT organization, there's those, you know, snowflake systems that you're like, we don't quite know about, but we know it's a one point of failure, and we want to be able to deal with that. Another project I wanted to mention about was Supercell, which was something we started back in 2010, I think. Actually looked this up. Basically, it's something we created with Facebook. They had this idea. They wanted to be able to test hip-hop and things on various platforms. They had the typical corporate problem. We want to do open source stuff, but we can't put stuff behind the corporate firewall. Where do we put it? So they came to us. We just started using GNU. We're like, we'll put it on GNU. We'll make it work like that. It basically was just a compute resource for projects to use, kind of try to make it somewhat like an OpenStack environment, but before OpenStack existed. And we got about a dozen projects using it. Drupal used it quite a bit until they moved on their own private cloud. But yeah, it was a cool idea. It was one of those things like, hey, I see this testing thing being important. Wouldn't it be cool to do this? But we never had the chance to find, time, funding, people to really focus on it. So it was just, there sitting. But really what I want to do is I revamp that. So I really want to rebuild everything with OpenStack because OpenStack fits the bill much better than GNU. Expand the resources, basically make it easier for projects to get access to the cloud. And they can do their integration testing. They don't have to go through AWS or anything. They just use an internal OpenStack cloud. Maybe eventually we can offer some pre-built managed CI solutions. So if they want to have something they don't want to manage and then we actually have the time to configure all that stuff, we could do that. I think that would be really important. And some other interesting things is being a university, we have access to cool new things that in the academia are happening. We moved into the College of Engineering a couple of years ago from the IS department, which is a better fit for us. But that also gave us a better tie-in with the academic and research side of things. So there's several people specifically at OSU that's doing some interesting things in testing and things like that. And we have a great test bed to basically, why don't we utilize these tools in open source projects and see if we can find more bugs and get to doing that. We're actually doing kind of a test run with that with Paul McKinney with the RCU and the Linux kernel. And just running a few things, we've already discovered a couple of RCU bugs he's never seen before. And the RCU, you want to be really stable in the Linux kernel. So I think that's really important. And it doesn't have to be limited to the OSU for any kind of research, but that's really cool. And there's other things that we want to do that's kind of outside of the hosting, but it's important because a lot of our students graduate and go out, and we want to really focus more on the education diversity side of it. So one thing that we're going to try to work on at OSU is create an open source track. Right now we're unofficially doing that by a boot camp program called our DevOps Boot Camp, which Emily actually helped me create. And it was just kind of an informal weekly meeting to kind of get people involved with Linux, DevOps, open source, everything. But really what we want to do is make a whole curriculum so people can come to OSU and take it. We also want to create some online classes, maybe target at some specific topics. How many of you have ever heard of the OSU Post-Bac Computer Science degree program? So I'll do a little pitching of my college or my school. So here's the TLDR version of it. So the idea is you've been out to the world, you've had your degree, realize you really want to get a job in IT somehow, but crap, I need to learn all this stuff. Well, if you have any kind of degree, in theory, if you take the classes online full time, you can get a CS degree, I think in 1 year or 2 years. I can't remember what.
You can be full time and get it in 1 year.
Yeah.
Typically 2 to 3 years if you're doing it 1 or 2 classes or 2 or 3 classes a term.
Yeah.
1 or 2, I guess.
Yeah. So we get a lot of students in that program asking, hey, can we do something with the OSL? And we're kind of like, crap, we don't know how to deal with remote people doing this stuff. So lots of people take a look at that. It's really, really cool. The nice thing about it, it actually increases the diversity pool. I think the amount of women, for example, in that program compared to on campus is doubled, almost nearly. It's insane. Anyways, we're hoping to get some classes included into that as well. So that could be things like ops related, open source related, whatever. We also want to diversify the OSL workforce. We've been doing a better job. We've been hiring, for example, more female students, more students of different types of cultures. But it's hard to do. And one of the things we're thinking about doing initially is at least going to Oregon community colleges, which actually have a pretty diverse culture. And there's a lot of IT around that. So we're going to try and get some of the OSL network stuff kind of included in that and try to get more people going with that and then beyond that as well. So kind of a summary of things. Testing resources are important for projects. We got to figure out what exactly that is, what's really missing, what do we need to focus on. We need to place the host random hardware that just can't be fit in the cloud or anything for testing purposes or hosting or whatever. We also need a lot of projects need to be able to host random application that helps their project do stuff. And they don't have to worry about it. They just want it to work. I think that's important. And we really need to increase our academic mission around DevOps and FOSS and so forth. So, and we need your help. So with that, what do you need? What is missing? What's important for you? And what should we be doing?
I just remembered the other terrible thing regarding hosting. There is no service out there where you can rent a Mac by the hour. And like I work on a programming language, and we need to test natively on OS X.
Mm-hmm.
And we don't want to just pirate things and break the license agreement for OS X, because that would be setting a bad example.
Yep.
And so we have to rent Mac. We have to either own a Mac and put it on someone's desk or in a data center, or rent it by the month from a place called Mac Stadium. And if OSL could provide some sort of short-term, even if the billing was comparable to AWS, there are a lot of projects that would be happy to pay that.
So how many would like to have some kind of Mac hosting testing access? Yeah, because there actually are Mac Mini rackable things you can put in a rack to make it work sanely.
But you gotta have a rack.
You gotta have a rack, and we have the rack. So, and I have thought about that. So a lot of that is we gotta figure out how do we carve out access to those systems. Do we just give full access? We kind of keep a schedule. Do we create an API or whatever? What would make sense? So what would be the ideal situation for that? For you, like just having a simple shell account to be able to run cron job to do stuff, compile things, test things.
I mean, anything that I hook into my current automation, the way that I would do that is set up, maybe even if the person provides you with an image, you image the Mac with that, so it's just clean at the start of the test run, build them for the number of hours it ran, and then spit it up with whatever image the next customer needs.
So that means you got to figure out how to automate Mac OS X installing. That sounds like not fun.
It's
But yes.
a whole lot of fun. I think it's related to why we don't have this available.
Yeah. Cool. What else is missing? What needs to be happening?
You said you guys have testing resources. That includes security, vulnerability testing as well.
That's what we want to do. But yes, that's things that we want to be able to do. So we want to be able to have, maybe it's software packages to help you test specific parts. Maybe there's some security tools that we can use to kind of make sure everything is working sanely. There's a lot of projects that come to us and we haven't done the best job of is that thing still running? What is it running? It's the classic, oh God, that one little box we forgot about just owned our whole infra. Yeah, it happens more than you think.
So this is in response to any of those questions. So you talked about expanding your OSL university network. Are there other schools besides you already in it? What is the current size of the network?
0 right now. Well, one, us. So we're just in the beginning stages of figuring that out. So if there's specific universities you think we should be targeting?
Cool. So I spent a couple of years going to universities who contacted us because they were interested in increasing policy stuff on their campuses, and I can think of a few that might be interested.
Yeah, definitely. I'll get you my card and or you can find me. But yeah, we're also thinking about going into some historically diverse colleges. So whether maybe that's African American college or maybe Latino type college or something like that to kind of build that diversity as well. So we're not intending to go to the MITs, the big people that really, no, we want to go to the ones that actually want to spend time and actually work with us to figure this out. So.
The online courses that you talk about, when is it expected to be up?
The what?
The online courses.
Online courses?
Yeah, boot camp's already online.
Yeah, we have the bootcamp stuff is all online. So if you go to bootcamp.osusl.org, all that content is up there. It's all on GitHub actually. But as far as the online courses, I don't know. It depends on getting funding to build the courses, and we have to go through the whole academic process to do all of that. But I'd say it's probably a couple of years out, knowing how things work. I would love to be able to do it tomorrow, but the reality of things, best case scenario next year, but I really don't think it would happen by then. But we kind of have a big presentation or a big vision plan that we've been pitching to a lot of companies, even Microsoft, to kind of help with the recruitment thing and getting funding so we can actually hire instructors to actually make these courses. You know, we could be the advising role and have them actually teach them online and everything. On that point, what would be some online courses you think would be important for us to focus on, especially initially?
Version control.
Version control?
Bootstrapping people into being able to interface with an open source community. So how to IRC politely, how to mailing lists, what the expectations are, how to ask questions, Google stuff. Like the Eric S. Raymond's How to Become a Hacker Guide, do that, but like in accredited course format.
What about things on the development side?
Testing, teach people to test, teach people to unit test their code and what frameworks are out there.
Yeah.
The next skills of evaluating the tools available for a job and which one to choose often get missed in curriculum. And then also those meta skills of just even working with issue tracker.
Yeah, so actually my boss has a class at OSU called Open Source, it's an open source topics class. And he actually goes through all of that stuff. And part of the class actually, you have to actually do some kind of contribution to an open source project, whether it's submitting a bug, putting a code documentation update or something like that. But that would definitely be one that we would put online, I think. Be really good. I've also thought about things on the operations side of things. I've noticed through the years that a lot of our students, you know, we kind of have a split between developers and sysadmins. And then that line kind of becomes blurred. You know, we have some developers that do more sysadmin things, and then we have some sysadmin folks that are now full-time developers. And really, in the real world, as I'm sure Emily knows, it's nice to know both, because you need to know what's really happening underneath and how it relates to what you're writing, and back and forth. And I totally lost my train of thought. But yeah, having probably online courses about some of that ops stuff that we do. So whether it means configuration management basics, or whether it just means how do you set up MySQL or Postgres or whatever, you know, services like that. You know, talk about HA type things, you know. We actually did that a little bit this past year. Me and Jordan Evans, we taught a system administration course at OSU. If you go to cs312.osusl.org, you'll see that and all the content. But I had taught it like 5 or 6 years ago, and it was more the traditional old school approach. And when we redid it, we're like, we don't want to do that. So we took a very more advanced approach. We spent like the first 2 weeks doing the traditional sysadmin type stuff, but then we dove into things of, you know, theory about monitoring and you know, what's actually important about that, and getting into containers. We actually had a Google Hangout with Brandon Phillips from CoreOS to talk about CoreOS. You know, it was really cool. So we're trying to do things like that, and I think that's probably important.
For what classes we need, I think also the classes at OSU that currently teach like philosophy of Unix are very much focused on here's how you would build this from the ground up. Whereas if you taught the same things like how to Unix, Linux, whatever, but from a here is how you run the system perspective, I think that could be really valuable for real world knowledge.
I think in the same way, probably best practices.
Best practices? Did I miss anything in my presentation you were hoping I was going to talk about?
Well, there wasn't a slide that's like where to go, how to like if you have some gear you'd like to rack the OSL for whatever reason, like how actually use OSL.
How do you actually partner with OSL, whether donating gear or being a project that you want to be in the OSL?
Now maybe that is you email you and
yeah,
everything's a step there.
The de facto answer I always tell everybody is we have an online form on our website that just goes to our ticket system to submit that. Whether that's donating gear or you just need to do hosting requests, and we usually go through that. And if it's a higher level, like, hey, we do have an info at OSU that goes to me and some other of my folks as well, and we can kind of go through that. But If it's donating gear and you work at a company, use the info address, and then I'll funnel with my people to make something happen. If you're a project that wants to be hosted, read our website and submit a hosting request. And depending on what type of request you have, we can make it work. There's some things that just are difficult for us because of the things I mentioned, things like build services, hosting a huge, FTP repository of stuff, things like that we have to be careful about. But hopefully the things I mentioned will fix some of that. Cool. Anything else I missed that I should have talked about? Cool. Well, I've got 4 minutes, so I guess thanks a lot for coming out. And I'll be around if you want to talk with me.